Welcome back to the Dirt Road. I'm here with Rick.
And I'm here with Mike.
And Rick, what are we talking about today?
Well, Mike, that's a good question. Why don't you ask me what I watched the other day?
What'd you watch the other day, Rick?
That's a good question, too. I was watching Gunsmoke,
Right.
which is one of the greatest shows of all time.
Awesome show.
It was on for 20 years. It never got bad.
Nope.
I don't know why, but I just got back into it. It's on TV Land. And I was watching a few episodes, and I didn't notice until a few episodes in that they actually have a trigger warning at the beginning of Gunsmoke. And before I even tell you what the trigger warning is, I don't know. Do you remember the show?
I do, very well.
That show was, I don't know if it was an outlier, but they were not a show that made like the Cowboys good and the Indians bad and everything.
No.
In fact, there were a bunch of episodes where the Indians were being mistreated and Matt Dillon came to their rescue.
Yeah.
James Arness. And it's not a show that is offensive in any way.
No.
At all. And even if it is, if you're somebody who's offended by the way life was in the 1870s, then you need to get a life because
it was the 1870s.
It was
talking
the
over 100 years
1870s.
ago.
Yeah, that's the way it was. And I would assume most people are intelligent enough to know that they're watching a show that takes place in the 1870s, and it might not be exactly as it is now. But whoever these people are out there that control things apparently don't think that viewers are smart enough to know this. So they put a trigger warning out at the beginning. I wrote it down. I just don't want to get it wrong. It said, the following show contains outdated cultural depictions. Viewer discretion advised. So they're not saying it contains violence, which it does. 18 people die on every episode from gunshots, right? It doesn't say there's violence, maybe don't let kids under 12 watch or something like that. It contains, quote unquote, outdated cultural depictions. So I asked myself, I'm like, what could that mean? What could they be referring to, right? Because, like I said, it's not a show that makes Indians out to be savages. It's just real. Some Indians were bad, some were good, some of the Western settlers were good, some were bad, but there were many episodes, like I said, where the Indians were the good guys and Matt Dillon came to their defense when the bad guys, the white men out there, were coming after. I couldn't figure out what the cultural depictions that could be so outdated were. And then, Mike, I figured it out.
What was it?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Men. The men were fucking men. They were men.
Whoa.
No, I'm not even joking.
Masculinity's not allowed anymore.
Right. But I'm dead serious. I'm dead ass right now. I really think that that's what they're referring to because I can't think of anything else. It doesn't make women out to be bad. Doesn't make blacks. In fact, there's very few. There were a couple episodes with Sammy Davis Jr., but there's nothing racist, nothing anti-Indian. The only quote-unquote cultural depiction that I could think of was that the men were manly.
Yeah.
Matt Dillon was a fucking man.
Well, yeah.
He was a man. He beat people up. He shot people.
Yeah.
He stood up for women.
Yeah.
Most of the men stood up for women. They
Traditional masculinity.
Right. They had fist fights. They had shootouts. They had things like that. And that's what I can't prove it. I really don't know if I'm right or not. But that is what I'm thinking is so offensive about that show that they have to put a warning out there to make sure that you know that men shouldn't be like this. Now I'm not in favor of shootouts in the street, just so you know. I'm not.
Depends on the circumstance.
I'm not about to challenge anybody to a duel. This is 2024. But it is nice once in a while to watch a man stick up for a woman.
Well, yeah, it's a depiction of actual masculinity, of what men should be. Listen, we've had a war on traditional masculinity in this country for a very long time. And actually, I would say worldwide probably, but really, I focus on America because that's where I live.
And that's what we know, for sure.
Yeah, that's absolutely. This is my culture. I live here. I know this culture. So we've had this war on masculinity going on for decades now, right?
Why do you
see it in
think
media, right?
Why do you think?
Because you can't control a populace if you don't control the men. So if you want to control an entire populace, right? But you have this cadre of strong masculine men. That's not easy to do. They're going to step up. They're going to be like, wait a minute. No, right? You look back after World War I, the bonus army, right? Those were veteran war fighters who said, you know what, we're going to march on Washington because you guys are screwing us the money you owe us. Mm-hmm. Right? And they did. They marched on Washington, and they really didn't necessarily win in the end. In the end, they actually got rounded up. And
MacArthur shot them.
Yeah, they shot them. It was just a very ugly period in history. Most people don't even realize happened. But the fact that they stood up and did what they did, that's a traditionally masculine thing to do. It's stepping up and saying, this is wrong, we're going to fix this. Now, if you have that and you want an authoritarian government, that's the last thing you want. You want a compliant, weak, cadre of men so that you can control them more easily. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you're right. I don't know, but maybe you're right. And while you were saying that, actually what popped into my mind is how many times have you seen, because we talk about men, right? And I think part of the role of a man is to help protect women. I'm sorry if that offends people out there.
Well, no, it's your role. You're a provider, protector.
And I see often on the news and on the internet, an old lady or even an old man or just somebody who's, not in a position to fight back, getting jumped on the subways or something, or getting
victimized in some way, sure.
And there's always video of it. And
yeah,
I keep thinking to
myself,
people
would rather take out the camera and film than actually get involved now.
Bingo. Like, I can't imagine, and I'm not saying I'm the toughest guy in the world, but I cannot imagine if I was witnessing an old lady getting mugged, that my first thought would be to take my camera out. I would think my first thought would be to try to get a couple of guys with me and say,
intercede.
Let's go do what we need to do and help this person. Which is what Matt Dillon would do, right? On Gunsmoke.
Traditional masculinity, right? So we need masculine men, just like we need strong women. We need masculine men.
But that's the cultural depiction that we need to be aware of and have discretion when we're watching fucking Gunsmoke. It's such a cool show. Watch Gunsmoke. It's got to be streaming somewhere. I watch it on TV Land because I'm an old man. I don't know how to stream.
I'm sure you find it anywhere, yeah.
It's got to be on somewhere.
But that's what happened, right? So over the last, 10 years or so, right? We've seen this explosion of trigger warnings and triggering events and safe spaces and all this nonsense where people, words are harmful, words are violent. Well, you could say violent things, but that's not committing violence against you. Me saying fuck you to somebody is not me punching them in the face. It's a completely different animal.
No, it's not a nice thing to do. But
no, it's not nice, but nice necessarily isn't violent.
No.
Violence is violence. Violence is taking a physical action against somebody and hurting them in some way.
Sure.
Violence is putting my hands on you. But now in the world we live in, they want us to believe that these words are violent,
Violence is Matt Dillon saying draw.
Well, yeah, that's definitely violence. Pounding a freaking piece of lead into your body.
But trigger warnings, I think, I don't know if you agree or not, I think are insulting.
They're very insulting.
Because they're telling, in my opinion, they're telling me and you and whoever else is about to watch or read something that we don't, and whoever we don't think you can handle this. And we think you need to be aware that, this might not be comfortable for you or something like that. Who the fuck is anybody to tell me that?
Listen, end of the day, it's the most ridiculous, backwards thing in the world, right? Have the fucking emotional maturity to be an adult, okay? If you don't like certain depictions, don't watch them,
Yeah, but
I don't have to go look for things on things that I don't like to watch it to complain about it, I don't do that. I go find the things I do like and I watch them. And if I see something I don't agree with, I don't lose my fucking mind and run out to the FCC or the internet or anywhere else to post, oh my God, this is awful.
Yeah.
No, stop with the trigger warning bullshit. Grow the fuck up. Be an adult. It's emotional maturity. There's no emotional maturity anymore. There's no responsibility anymore for actions. There's no emotional maturity anymore. The whole bullshit microaggression thing, that's complete nonsense. We're tearing down statues and erasing our history. And these people think they're doing it in the name of cultural justice, but reality...
But who are they protecting, Mike?
What they're protecting is... remember 1984 Orwell, right?
Of course.
Or Animal Farm, better example, right?
Mm-hmm.
So remember Animal Farm, when they first took over the farm, they put all the instructions on the wall. But then at night, those instructions would mysteriously change and be rewritten. And then it was mandated that they go by those instructions, though. So as the instructions kept changing, they kept changing. They got more and more where the pigs rose to power and everybody else kind of got crapped on, right? That's what's happening in our culture now, if you look at it. Because what they're doing is they're erasing history, right? You're tearing down statues. You're editing books after they've been written, sometimes hundreds of years later, right? We're editing books.
Sure.
We're editing everything. We're trigger warning everything. We're erasing things. They're erasing the cultural landscape and the history and rewriting it right in front of your face. And the only reason you do something like that is because you want to rewrite things and you want to move things to a place where you need them to be.
Yes. I mean, I agree with every word you just said. But you think of some of the things like that have been around for a long time, like the movie Gone with the Wind.
Sure.
Right? All of a sudden now it's considered offensive. It's not offensive. In fact, if you watch the show with if you watch the movie with half a brain, you realize that first of all, it's showing the way life was, right?
Yeah, it's a depiction of what life was like at that time in that place.
So one of the big things that gets the culture warriors all upset is the scene where Prissy, I think that was the one played by Butterfly McQueen, right? She's yelling, Miss Scarlet, I don't know nothing about Burton, no babies.
Yeah.
Right? And they said it is offensive because of the vernacular and the way she was speaking and everything. But if you really think about it, it's the opposite, right? Because everybody knows that even then, in real time, if that were real, and that's just a movie, it's not real, that woman would have been perfectly capable of saying, Miss O'Hara, I think we need to go get a midwife. I really don't know how to do this. Right?
Right, yeah.
But she had to speak that way because that was real white supremacy, right?
That was back when it was actually
right.
Yeah, when it was still
You're
slavery.
You're not supposed to be able to. Well, even through Jim Crow, the
absolutely.
idea
Jim
was
Crow,
is that you being an African American have to speak that way to show your inferiority to me, the white person, right?
Right, because it was a cultural, divide. It was a cultural, you're down here culturally and I'm up here culturally, and you have to respect these boundaries.
Exactly, and the way to respect it is to show
that
that
you're
not capable.
That really went on.
Right, to show that you're not capable of speaking properly. I am, right? I speak the King's English
or whatever.
Right, so that's and again, anybody with a brain would see the racism involved in there.
Right, but you're just depicting what it actually was like. For
but to say that
time.
It's offensive to have the character speak that way, no, that was the reality, and that is what really shows you what real white supremacy was, right?
Exactly.
You must speak this way when you're in front of me. Again, that character, if it were a real person, would have been perfectly capable of saying, Miss O'Hara, we need to get a midwife. I don't know how to do this. But she's kind of forced to say it in that vernacular and say, Miss Scarlet, I don't know nothing about Burton, no babies. Right? To show her inferiority as a black woman to this white woman. So they take things that are not only is that not offensive, it really does show the real white supremacy of the time. And if you watch it with a brain, you would understand that. So it's not going against what the culture warriors would want. It's doing exactly what the culture warriors do want or say they want, which is to show real white supremacy where it really was. But instead they want to erase that. And I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't, but if you look at it in the context of, say, in the context of, control, right? So we were talking about, the censorship complex earlier,
right.
So when you want to control a certain group of people or you want to control a certain narrative, you have to control the information within that narrative. And one of the ways to do that is to make something offensive, because most people don't want to offend, right? Whether side you're on, doesn't matter politically, right? Most people want to be liked, right? And they want to be considered to be an honest, decent, fair person. That's just something that's built into humans as a people. Most humans, not me at all anymore. Whatever I had of that has pretty much gone away completely. But most people want to be liked or be recognized as being virtuous or whatever the case might be, right? So if you're trying to take power or you're trying to form a certain narrative, the easiest way to do that across the masses is to change that standard, is to adjust it. Not even that much, just tweak it just a little bit. So now all this is racism, all this is offensive, all this needs trigger warnings, and all this needs to be changed. But what have you done? You've erased that part of history. And now you can rewrite it the way you want it. And if you rewrite it, you can change the whole narrative that flows from it.
But this is where I don't understand that point. So if their goal is to erase it, then
to reframe
how would that show what really was back then, which was real white supremacy, right? So by erasing or canceling, whatever phrase you want to use, Gone with the Wind, let's say.
Well, the depiction is considered racist, right?
But the depiction is not racist. The depiction is showing the effects of racism.
Right, what I'm saying is that they're saying the depiction is racist.
But they're wrong.
Well, they are wrong, and they're wrong across the board. But it's not about wrong or right. The thing with people that are in this position, these people, right? And I don't consider it left, right, or whatever. I consider authoritarian and normal people, and that's really what I come down to with this.
I agree.
But the authoritarians, they don't care about wrong or right. That's not what their goal is. Their goal is power. So if this is a means for them to kind of twist the population to a certain place so they can take that much more power, they'll do that. They would go the other direction completely if they thought that would help them gain their power much more easily. They're only interested in power. At the end of the day, authoritarians only care about power over people.
Yeah,
and whatever means gets them there. So I think this is just one way that they found with this current generation, with the whole cancel culture and this whole thing with whatever. I think this is just one way that they found to get people moving in the direction they need them to. Because if you look at the movies and the trigger warnings and all those things, that empowers the censorship complex we were talking about earlier. I'm kind of off camera, guys. Sorry, but we'll get to that next. But it empowers that whole thing. It kind of feeds into it and makes it that much stronger. So it's just a kind of a way of dragging the populace into the censorship complex and making them okay with it. And then using the censorship to really limit information and completely change the narrative and award themselves more power.
Yeah, and that's what they do. And again, I don't even know who they are when I say they, but I think
any authoritarians, like the people at the very top. But I don't think it's. I think it's a uniparty.
Trying to control what you have access to, what you read, what you see,
what you can say, what you can do,
eventually leads to controlling what you say.
Right.
Which then leads to controlling what you think.
Well, it's happening in England right now, right? 8,000 people arrested in just over the last month or so in England for either going to not doing anything illegal at the protest, just showing up to protest against migration, or posting memes or things on social media. And then you have one of England's police commissioners or chief of police or whatever saying that they're looking to extradite Americans who speak out against them or whatever. Like, guy, we beat you in 2 friggin' wars already. Like, how many times you gotta get your ass handed to you?
Go back to the War of 1812.
Hell yeah! Listen, you got your ass kicked twice. Don't come here playing that game. It's not gonna end well for you.
But so, for instance, with statues, right? Remember
removing the statues,
right.
Colonel
So
Lee and everybody.
4 years ago, that was the big thing.
Tearing down statues, sure.
Tearing down statues,
sure.
And I remember Trump saying. Remember that whole stupid thing where they tried to say that he said that there were good people on both sides?
Oh, the Charlottesville hoax. Yeah, it was complete nonsense. Bullshit, made up.
That what he was saying is that there are good people on both sides of the debate, whether or not that statue of Robert E. Lee should stand. Now, I kind of don't know what I go back and forth on the Confederate statues. I did kind of always wonder why we are a country that does put statues up of people who were, in essence, traitors, right? I mean, they fought against the United States government. But I also get, being an historian, I understand that there was an attempt at reconciliation. We couldn't survive as a divided country. And, we kind of...
And that was I think the big drive for a lot of statues. Plus, it's part of your history.
Right. So, well, yes.
It's a shared history.
But I always got the argument on that. I never got the argument on the racist part, because if you take that to the logical conclusion, then that's why you then have to tear down the George Washington statues, right? Because Robert E. Lee was no more or less of a racist than, George Washington or anybody, right? Who owned slaves. Right.
Most of the founding fathers, right.
So that, I remember Trump saying they'll start with the Confederate statues, and then the next thing you know will be Jefferson and Washington. And he ended up being right.
Yeah.
I don't know, though, that the people doing that are smart enough where they took it to the logical conclusion. I just think it's that activists, by nature, can't accept a win, right? Because if they accept a win, then they're out of a job.
Well, yeah, they have to have something to rally against.
So when those activists did get places like Virginia to take down the Confederate statues and whatnot, well, they couldn't just say, all right, good game, well played, I won, and move on with life, because they're an activist and they have to be against something. So then the next step is, well, now we got to go after the rest of the statues, whether it's George Washington or Thomas Jefferson or anything. When they had nothing to do with the Confederacy, they let's just get rid of the American flag then, right? Because slavery existed under the American flag for 100 years or whatever it was, 80 years. So they can never stop. It's why Al Sharpton still has a role on TV, right? He couldn't take the win after that Howard Beach event. You guys could Google it, in New York back in the 80s, right? When he got that and those kids got prosecuted in Howard Beach or whatever.
Yeah.
Because then he's out of a job. So he has to look under every rock until he could find racism somewhere else.
For him, that's his business model. Right. And for a lot of them, that's what it is. And even for the censorship complex, right? And you have the outrage industry. Mm-hmm. I put Al Sharpton clearly into the outrage industry, right? So him and like these other race baiters or whatever, they're in the outrage industry. They're out there to make, people outraged so that they contribute money to his cause, or he gets airtime, or you buy his book, or whatever it might be. And the cancel culture people kind of fall in that same category, the outrage industry. And the greatest win, the best vehicle they ever found for their nonsense is social media.
Right.
The birth of social media has taken them to heights they probably never thought possible.
Right.
In their ability to both, spread nonsense, create problems, and make money, which is really the ultimate goal, is make money.
Well, and Al Sharpton, right? Al Sharpton used to basically blackmail businesses.
He still does.
It still does.
He
I
still
guess.
does. National Action Network.
But,
they still do.
Yes.
Yep.
So there was money involved there, but the people who are going after our cultural heritage and trying to get books not taught in school anymore, like the Scarlet Letter or Huck Finn, or
right, because it's offensive or whatever.
Right,
yeah.
or remove statues and erase history, basically.
Yeah.
They're not making money off of it. Not the ones you're talking about anyway on social media and everything.
No,
they're not outrage incorporated.
No, but they're useful. They would Stalin would call useful idiots, right? So you get these people, these authoritarians, this uniparty, whatever side you want to talk about. The authoritarians, whatever authoritarian people that want to steer the narrative and want to move the country to a place where they can control it more easily, or control the outcomes more easily. What are they going to do? They're going to find those people who love being outraged about everything, and they're going to utilize the social media platforms to do it. And they're going to say, hey, look at these racist statues over here. That's all you got to do, is plant the seed and let them go off and do what they got to do. So it gives them two things. One, it takes any attention off of what they're doing in the background, as far as stripping away rights, Patriot Act, things like that. And two, it creates this national conversation about something that has nothing to do with anything that's actually going on. It's a way of dividing people.
Well, yes.
So they fight each other,
right,
and they're not paying attention to what they're doing up here, and it helps them to change the narrative up here so they can push policy up here that takes even more of your rights away.
Right, because if you take away our cultural heritage, right, if you take away the books that we all used to read in school,
the things that bind us together.
Right, then you have complete disunity.
Yeah, because you're taking the common ground away.
Right. What do you have all over your house? You have pictures of your kids, right? Well, you have other things too. I see Batman over there. But I mean, other than that, you have pictures of your kids. You have pictures of your family, right?
Sure.
Because that's your heritage. That's who you are. You look at it. You remember
it's your
things.
Family. Yeah, it's your history.
And seeing the statues or great authors reading great books, things like that, that reminds us of the thing that we do have in common, which is that we are Americans. It doesn't matter who wrote a book. Great books are great for a reason, right? They promote thought, they get you thinking, and they're books
conversation
that
and debate.
Anybody can relate to, right? You think of the Scarlet Letter. If you remember reading that in school, right?
Great book.
And Hester was branded with the A for adultery.
Yeah, for adultery. Yep.
And in the end, of course, the hypocrisy that the Reverend was the father and all that.
Yeah.
So we're talking. You could take that story and relate it to anybody, anywhere in the world, right? Hypocrisy, fake moral outrage, things like that. Who gets to decide what's moral, right? They decided that because she had a baby out of wedlock, that was immoral and she should be punished. And now we have standards now that people revolt against or whatever. These books can get you to discuss and to think of things and relate to things. It doesn't matter that they were written by somebody 200 years ago or that the person was of a certain race or anything. In fact, if you think about the things that some of them are canceling, they're canceling things that really promote what they pretend to be in favor of, like a book like Huck Finn.
Sure.
Right? That was an anti-racist book. That was more of an anti-racist book than anything, somebody like Robin DiAngelo could ever come, or Ta-Nehisi Coates could ever come up with.
Sure.
Because what Mark Twain did in that book is he took a little white boy and put him in the same position as a runaway slave.
Yep.
Right? Because Huck was trapped. He was held against his will by his father for money. He was abused. Right? He was whipped. He had to escape. He had to run away. And that paralleled the whole experience of Jim the slave, who was also held against his will.
Exactly.
He wasn't abused by that current person who owned him, but he overheard the threat that he was going to be sold down to the Deep South, so he ran away. And now the two of these people running away together had more in common than they had different, right? Huck was going through something very, very similar to Jim. He was abused, he was held against his will for profit, and he was escaping that. And that's something that if you're a good teacher, you can get through to kids. You can have kids come to those conclusions and see that you do have something in common with each other.
Well, yeah,
just like Huck and Jim did.
It makes it a human affair.
Exactly.
And not a racial affair.
And then Huck was going through a real internal struggle.
Sure.
Because the right thing to do in that time period was to turn Jim in.
Right, exactly.
Right? He was, what was it, the Widow Douglas? The Widow Douglas's slave. So the right thing to do would turn him in, but Huck loved Jim.
Yeah.
And it felt wrong to him to put Jim
man.
back in the same position he was in.
Right.
I don't want to get into a whole lecture about the book Huck Finn, but the point is that
Right.
this sort of a conversation in a classroom would be way more productive than banning that book and having kids read some nonsense by Robin DiAngelo or Ta-Nehisi Coates or something like that about how to be an anti-racist.
I read those books. They were complete garbage. Listen, they were nothing more than race-baiting nonsense. It was, using pretty verbiage to try and make the case for something that doesn't even exist, much less ever existed. Their whole premise is completely backwards. It's based on false history, false premises, and just not at all rational. There's no rational thought in any of those things. And I read them just to be sure, just to know that I was looking at what I was looking at. And there's nothing there. It's creating boogeymen of shadows and trying to make some kind of a narrative.
Yeah, but they make a lot of money off of it.
Well, again, outrage industry, right?
Yeah.
So, the problem that with Huck Finn, that whole conversation, that whole thing you just went through, is a perfect example of what teachers should be able to do in a classroom. And why those books are so relevant and should be in the classroom. Right. But instead what we get is, that gets banned because we don't want that kind of conversation, that kind of intelligent, thought process and learning to reason.
Because of the word that Huck used often, which was
I understand.
the word
it's a
that
negative
people
word.
used
It's
at the time.
not a word I would use. It's not a word I would use.
But it was used at the time. It makes the
but
book
it's
authentic.
culturally, in the context of the book, it absolutely is contextual to the book.
Of course.
So it
and
should
just the
be
fact that
spoken
he
about.
called somebody he loved that.
Yeah, because it shows that it was a normal, everyday thing to them. And it shows you the kind of reality of that time frame and also the moral struggle he had, which I thought was amazing point. But, that should be debated and spoken about in the classroom. That's going to enrich and help students learn to both reason, learn their moral, kind of develop their moral compasses and understand the context of where they came from and where they're going. There's so many good things that come out of that.
And that same paradox, by the way, you could relate to history 100 years later when Lyndon Johnson was signing the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, and Lyndon Johnson used that word like you would use the word coffee.
Oh yeah, he loved using that
rolled
word.
off of his Texas tongue.
I mean, look, you have
all the time. So, but again, it just shows human nature, right?
Yeah, because that's the you got everything. When you take away the history, when you take away statues, and you take away all these things in these books and whatever in the history of things, all you're really doing is taking away your ability to understand why those things were the way they were. You're taking away the lessons that can be learned from that. Those things happened, and they were not great. They were awful, right? Slavery was awful. But, my problem with that is we're arguing about slavery in the 1800s. What about the damn slavery going on right now?
Yeah, sure.
Worldwide, there are 1,000% more slaves now worldwide than there ever were at that time. And even slavery at that time, as awful as it was, never reached the kind of levels or the ability to move people the way they do now.
Never reached the ability to what?
To kind of move people the way they can now.
What
Like
do
they
you
have
mean?
these human trafficking networks that are so advanced and
We
so
live in a more
large.
advanced time now.
That's what my point is. We've grown a population, we've grown our culture, so to speak, but yet we're ignoring the elephant in the room with slavery. We're fighting about things that happened, 100 plus years ago, but nobody's talking about what's happening today. When we left the campaign, we started like a nonprofit thing where we kind of started looking at different corruption things like that. And it's all just retired investigators and prosecutors, people like that. And they're from all political stripes, honestly, these people, right? There's a lot of them now out there, a lot of them. And it's a completely informal thing. But one of the biggest things that comes through that pipeline of investigation of things that we work on for the last couple of years now is human trafficking. And most of this is sexual trafficking, and it's children.
Well, of course.
It's children. So why are we not talking about that? I mean, we can get beyond even the sexual trafficking, right? Let's talk about like the sweatshops in the city, where you have, Chinese and Asian or Latin
Mike,
people
you could talk about both. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not
a zero-sum game, but I just hate that way they're forcing the narrative to be just about this 100 years ago, but don't talk about this what's happening right now.
Yeah, but what happened 100 years ago is important, Mike. It's
very
it's
relevant.
part of our history. Just like learning, you wouldn't
very
say this.
relevant.
You wouldn't say we shouldn't, not talk so much about the Constitution. We should worry about laws that are passed now. I mean,
what I'm saying is the conversation about the history is what would allow us to have the conversation about what's happening now.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But they're taking away that ability to actually rationally discuss what happened then in a realistic way, and they're making it all about outrage. So it's kind of shadowing or kind of hiding what's actually happening now. So it's taking our ability to actually be rational, thought-provoking kind of conversations that we need to have as a country about what's really happening.
Yeah, and that I agree is that
being
that's
eclipsed by that.
That's the part. What you said, I think, are the two most important words, or compound word. Thought provoking. And that's what I was trying to kind of get across when I was talking about Huck Finn, right?
No, you did it
Is
well.
that you don't just read the book to read the words, right? If you teach kids how to read, you teach them how to try to understand and question and put themselves in the place of others. You could learn more about, I don't know, maybe more, but you could learn a lot about slavery.
Sure.
And a lot about how it affected even a white kid, right?
Absolutely.
By reading a novel like that, than just having a quick lecture and say there were 4 million slaves on the eve of the Civil War and it was bad and blah, 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 blah. Kids have to learn how to think and how to try to associate and how to put themselves in other people's spots. But when we tell people that you can't understand the struggles of another group of people, that's nonsense, because human beings struggle.
Yeah.
And you could always relate to someone else's struggle, and that helps you with your struggle, right? To relate to other people's struggles. But just taking a book or a show like Gunsmoke or a movie like Gone with the Wind or statues or names or words and changing them and getting rid of them, I don't understand what it accomplishes other than power, right? That some group of people was able to say, we got the Cleveland Indians to turn their name into the Cleveland Guardians. And what cracks me up is that it probably wasn't even Native Americans that did that. It wasn't. Probably white people that did that.
Well, yeah, it's white liberal virtue signalers, right? Look how virtuous we are. We're making things right. No, you're not. You're making things worse.
Yeah.
Right? They took Aunt Jemima off the syrup bottle, took the Indian off the butter. Why?
I don't know.
What would you accomplish?
I don't know. Maybe they know. I mean, tell us. What does that actually do? What Indian are you talking about on the butter?
Land O'Lakes butter used to have a depiction of an Indian on its label.
Oh, I don't remember that.
And they took it off. They took it off. The Indian took the Indian off. They took Aunt Jemima off the
that
bottle.
I know. The Aunt Jemima. I don't understand why. Maybe the viewers out there could tell us. I don't understand what that accomplishes.
It's nothing more than a virtue signal, right? It's a bunch of people trying to prove how they're part of the cause to make things right. But the cause to make things right happened. We fought a civil war. Hundreds of thousands of people died to end slavery, right?
Yes, yeah.
Then we had the Jim Crow era, and even more people died fighting back against that to end that whole dark period of our history, and that finally came to an end. And then now we're back to fighting over this stuff again because people just want to use the A, make money, or B, grab power. And that's really all it is.
Well, I think we also discussed this in another video. It's also a way to keep your attention off the real things that are happening, right?
Well, that's the problem, right? Because you have very, very bad legislation coming out everywhere. I mean, look at England, right?
So if we're busy fighting with each other over things like race and sexuality,
we can't get together and deal with these people above us.
Right, who are hurting all of us in some way or another.
Across the board. Listen, if you're going to censor one side, okay, and you think that's never going to come back and boomerang on you, you're an idiot. You're an idiot. Okay, you're an idiot. Because these people don't care about you. Stalin called them useful idiots for a reason, and they look at you exactly that same way. Authoritarians are authoritarians, and that's it. They're not authoritarians for a cause. They're authoritarians, period. There's no authoritarian for a cause. There's no one person who's going to make things all well and right and good like that, all right? Christ came once. When he comes back again, maybe he'll do that again the second time, but Christ isn't coming right now. This isn't the tribulation. We're not there yet. Take a seat, relax, it's okay. Fight, take your damn country back, because that censorship and all this stripping of your rights across the board, whether you're left, right, whatever, is going to hurt you and your kids and your grandkids.
Well, it's hurting our society. It's not even about, I don't even know if it's just about country, because like you said, this is kind of going on in the whole Western world
Western world, yeah.
Just in the Western world. Because you know what? The countries that have real problems, in the global South, like real poverty, where they have to shit in the street, they don't have time to fucking argue over stuff like this. This is something that, and Andrew Basovich wrote about this in a book about, I forget the title of it, about how we kind of blew the post-Cold War era, but he was talking about it. Other people have written about it. It's not my own individual thought. I wish I could take credit for it, but we see a lot of this start to happen after the end of the Cold War.
Sure.
And it was mainly because now we didn't have that fear of the other, right? The Russians.
The boogeyman.
Right. That unified fear. That one thing that kind of united us was that, we were worried about getting nuked by the Soviets. And now we lived in a time in the 1990s of relative peace, prosperity. Things were good. When things were good, now you have time to get stupid,
Well, yeah.
You know, just get really, really stupid.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened. So I'm not saying I hope that we go through a bad period of time. I don't. But that's why you see this stuff more in the Western world, where we have things pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, overall, our way of life is good. Our standard of living is good, you know, comparatively anyway,
Sure.
to countries that are where they just have better things to do
'cause you
with their
have-
time than worry about.
Well, because they're
banning
fighting
abortion.
to survive, right? And we're fighting over how many genders there are.
Right, and we're worried about, God forbid, you watch Gunsmoke and see a masculine man
Whoa, masculinity. Whoa.
do something.
Listen,
You know,
modern feminism to me is it's completely anti-feminine. Like, right?
yeah. I
You're
mean,
talking about like this whole modern feminist, attack on men, toxic masculinity or whatever.
yeah, I don't understand what toxic masculinity is. Listen, again, everybody has the right to live their own lives. You know, I happen to think, like Shakespeare said, the world's a stage and all play a part, right?
True.
I don't see anything wrong with playing the part of a man, playing the part of a woman, playing the part of a child, playing the part of a husband, a wife, or whatever. Kind of understanding your role in the world, understanding your role in life. That kind of makes life a little bit easier, I would think.
Well,
than
yeah, it's because
wondering
you
how I'm
define
supposed to
yourself
act.
and you define your path that way.
Right, and again, I'm not saying that. I don't know how you define a man. I mean, to me, this is what I told one of my sons one time when he laid the line on me that he's a grown man. I said, grown maybe, man not yet. To me, my definition, and it's just my own. You're a man when you wake up every morning and you're the last person you think about.
Yes.
That's when you're a man.
Yes.
When every morning you wake up and the first thing you think about is how you have to provide for other people, protect other people, raise other people, go to work to feed other people. That to me is when you're a man. It's not necessarily when you have a child, but just when you realize that you're not the most important thing out there. You're there basically to protect and help other people. But whatever, that's just my own little definition. But I don't see anything wrong with a man being a man, a woman being a woman, having a certain role. And I'm not talking about Handmaid's Tale or anything else that these liberal jerks would bring up. I'm just talking about you have a role in life. Play that role. There's nothing wrong with that.
Handmaid's Tale is more likely to happen with the left-leaning bent that we see with the fascist kind of organization where you have this authoritarians taking more and more control. That's more likely to bring about something like a Handmaid's Tale than anything that me and you are talking about, right? We're talking about freedom here, right? Freedom to be who you are, what you are, whatever. You want to be 52 different genders? Go for it. It's your business. I don't care. I really don't. You could be a space alien. Go ahead. Go. You want to identify as a banana? Go ahead. I don't care. I don't. But with them right now, it's more this push to force you. Like, you have to acknowledge me. You have to respect this. You have to respect. I don't respect anything. It's my freedom to tell you to go fuck yourself. Okay? I don't care. I don't care.
Nobody is entitled. They talk about it. I don't even remember what the word is that they use now. You validate. Right?
Validate.
You have to be. No, you don't have the right to be validated.
No, you don't.
You just don't. You have the right to be left alone. You have the right to live your life. But I don't need to validate you. You don't need to validate me. I don't demand that anybody validate my beliefs, either my Christian beliefs or my family beliefs or anything like that. I don't need your validation.
No.
What do I care? I don't care what you think about me. But I'll tell you this right now. I'd rather my son grow up to be like Matt Dillon than like Matt Damon.
Oh, God, yeah.
I mean, I don't see anything wrong with being a man.
Men should be men.
Good man.
Listen, men have a role biologically, just down to the actual science. I know you guys say trust the science, but you guys are retarded, because the whole point of science is to challenge the science, to learn more, to go further. That's the whole idea. So trust the science was the biggest bunch of nonsense I ever heard. How to say that? Now back to reality. Biology. Men are built to do certain things better, because that's our role. That's what we've become. We've evolved to be a certain way. So we do certain things better. We're the hunter-gatherers. We're the hunters, right? We're going to go out and chase down the animal or hunt, get the food, be that provider in that way. Whereas women were evolved and they carry the babies. They birth them and they mother and they have that more nurturing nature and they're built to do these things. We can't do that as men.
It has nothing to do with subservience.
Not at all. No. Listen, even if you look at like faith, right? We look at the Bible, for instance, right? The Bible doesn't place man above woman. If people try and play that game and say that shit, and that's the complete biggest bunch of nonsense you'll ever see. What the Bible really is talking about, especially in the New Testament, what Christ is talking about is this partnership, right? Equal footing, where the man has to support her and make sure gets what she needs to maintain that home and that family. But she's there to support him as well, to make sure he can be that provider that brings those things to her that she needs. It's a team. It's supporting one another.
It's a team effort, right? Exactly. Yeah. But I'm glad you just brought that up, because it popped back into my mind something else that really ticks me off. The way that they change the vernacular and tell you what to say and everything. Have you noticed people don't use the phrase husband and wife anymore, or even spouse? Everything is a partner. This is my partner. Like you're in a fucking law firm or something.
Yeah, because words do matter, and they stripped away the meaning of it.
Exactly, because if you're a partner, then there is no husband role or
no
wife role.
Right, and it demeans everything. Yeah.
Right, so then it just becomes a partnership, which takes all the love out of it, takes all the familyness out of it, right? It's just you're a partner as if you're in business together.
Right, like some kind of an economic arrangement.
Exactly. Yeah. And it takes everything away. So, and that's why people do try to change the words we use and change the words we see.
And that's why the war on words.
That one word, I think, is really been a powerful tool for whatever this cabal is that's trying to change everything.
Yeah.
By basically taking away husband and wife. And it's happened, it must happen gradually, but I've just noticed it lately. So many people using that phrase, this is my partner, when they're there with a wedding ring on. It's not your partner. That's
Lauren's
your
my wife
or your husband.
Right. That's Lauren's my wife, right? And our roles are complementary, not adversarial.
Not at all.
Right, but that's how they want to frame it up now. Like somehow it's adversarial. Like she has to overcome my want to control her. Like I don't want to control her. It's the last thing I want to do. I want to empower her. I want to enrich her. I want her to be successful, because if she's successful, I'm successful. But if I'm successful, she's successful. So we're working together. So there's a partnership in that sense.
Right.
But she is my wife. I've dedicated my life to her. I'm faithful to her. She's faithful to me. And that matters. And that has to matter. This hedonistic insanity we see, this cultural rot that we see, is simply because you've broken up these family units and taken away the kind of moral bedrock of society, over the last 50 or so years, since the sexual revolution of the 70s, right? Probably where it really the 60s more, but the 70s is where you kind of saw it take hold really in cultural, right? There was free will, free sex, free this, free that. And AIDS came along and kind of stunted that a bit, because people got nervous. They didn't want to die from AIDS. So it kind of slowed that down a bit. But then in the 2000s, you started seeing it kind of come back again to the point now where you're seeing STD rates are dramatically higher than they've been in a very long time. You're seeing promiscuity is dramatically higher than it is in a long time. And that corresponds directly to higher anxiety rates, higher depression rates, people who, have crippling social anxiety because they can't function in a society like this.
Well, it's because we don't know where we fit in anymore, right? And that creates
because they destroyed all the paradigms that were there. Yeah, the structure's gone.
Right, exactly.
It's
so
destroyed.
if you don't, it would be like if you showed up to work every day not knowing what your job is.
Right.
You'd have a bad day at work, right?
Yeah, because you spend all day anxious trying to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to be doing.
Exactly. So now everything from telling kids that, you probably don't know what gender you are, and telling people that you're not husband and wife but you're partners, or be careful, don't watch Gunsmoke, and if you do, make sure you understand that, Matt Dillon, that's a bad guy, he acts tough. It just takes away, when you don't know what your role, don't understand where you fit in this world. It's going to lead to anxiety, it's going to lead to depression, it's going to lead to bad things. Listen, I know we've said it before, and it's true. Stop looking to Donald Trump to save us, right? Stop. He's
one man. He'll bring good policies, but the real work is down at the local level.
That's government policy. We're talking about societal issues.
And that happens in your home, in your job,
just in your life.
Your
just
life.
Be who you are.
The most local level.
It seems that the more traditional type people are afraid to show that they're traditional type people.
They are, and it's a lot of people. Look, courage is contagious, right? So we talked about populism in one day, right? And I think that's why Donald Trump is so popular in 2016, 2020, even now. I think he's so popular because a lot of the silent majority, as they called them, right, was able to kind of put their weight behind somebody that was saying all the things they wanted to say but couldn't,
Yes.
And he's crass at times, and he says things that you're like,
but those people got to express themselves through the vote.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's the
populist. And that was the biggest fuck you to the people who are running things now that you ever could have given them.
You have this, corporations and people in power in the government that are pushing things that are completely insane. Listen, I have no problem with drag queens. I have no problem with torch song type shows where they drag queens singing. I have no problem with any of it. It doesn't bother me. I don't care one way or the other. They can live their life. It's fine. But when we're pushing drag queens into, pre-K and elementary schools and forcing this narrative onto small children, and people stand up and they're offended by this, or they're putting pornographic material about homophobia, homosexual acts and things like that into books in schools. Listen, I don't want any kind of sexual stuff in an elementary school. It just doesn't belong there. It's not appropriate. It's for the parents.
The idea why that and all these other things are being pushed is because there is some group. Again, I always say they. I don't even know who they are, right? But there is some.
You could define it. I just say I say the authoritarian uniparty is what I call it.
Whoever they are, they don't want structure. They don't want a structured
No, they're tearing
society.
down every structure and everything that made this country successful. I mean,
Right.
look, they attacked manufacturing, they attacked agriculture, they're attacking the culture now, the actual cultural fabric of the country now.
And it's worked. I mean, you look at church attendance or any kind of religious worship is way down. We're still higher than most other countries, I think, other than Muslim countries maybe, but we're still higher than most of the Western world.
Muslims is like kind of a misnomer. So like everybody says, I saw something recently. Somebody was saying, "Oh, Muslims are the fastest growing religion in the world," and I'm like, "That's because they have more babies."
Yeah, they have more babies because their families stay together,
right?
And because they still do believe
because
in
they're still preaching a traditional lifestyle, and they're still preaching traditional morals.
Listen, I'll tell you a quick story. I mean, it kind of has nothing to do with what we're saying here, but maybe it does. I went to this is going back about 6 months. I had a nail in my tire. And I went to go to the gas station to the repair shop to get a plug, right? So I go in, it's right in my neighborhood. I've been in there before a couple of times. Guy that owns it they're Muslims all in there. So I walk in and I ask for the manager, and I was told he'll be back in a little while. I said, "Do you know how long?" He said, "No, he's praying."
Oh yeah, full of prayer.
Yeah. So I could have left. There's a million gas stations. This is on the Queens-Nassau border. I could have got a plug anywhere. But I stayed for a few minutes, and I thought to myself, if that guy who owned that gas station there, he had no idea whether I was coming in for a $10 plug or an $800 transmission job. Right. He could have blown a lot of money because we New Yorkers are impatient, and we could go to any other repair
Everybody
shop.
wants instant gratification.
But he put his prayer time ahead of money.
Of course.
And ahead of business. Because he knows in his life there's something bigger than him.
Yes.
There's something bigger than money.
Right.
And I really found that admirable.
So do I.
I really did. I respected that tremendously. Absolutely. Especially since I can't even get your goddamn nephew to get out of bed to go to church for 45 minutes once a week. This guy's going and praying 5 times a day and possibly giving up money. Because again, for those of you who don't know, New Yorkers are real patient. Most wouldn't have done what I did. They would have gone down the block to another gas station.
Yeah.
Now again, we're just talking about a $10 tire plug, but he didn't know that.
Right.
You know what I mean? He didn't know that.
He doesn't know that, yep.
So I do have a lot of hope that the Muslim population in America, because they're the ones standing up right now, a lot of them, against these things that are going on in schools.
Sure, they did in Cincinnati and Ohio and a few other places. There were very big pushes.
Their families, Asian immigrant families, they stay together. They value education. Yeah. They don't call their wife their partner.
No, it's your
They
wife.
don't call their husband their partner. It's their husband. That's their wife. They I think are really our best hope for that, because they're also a protected group that you can't go after, right? So the left can't go after Muslims.
They try to do it around the sides. They try and steer that, or they if they can't steer it or change it, they suppress it, right? So that's what you see mostly, which comes back to the whole censorship complex, which is fostered by our own government, right? So our government funds NGOs to censor us.
Yeah.
They send billions of dollars a year into these NGOs because they can't censor us directly because of our First Amendment rights. Right. They fund NGOs to censor us, which then go to Facebook or X.
That's how they monitor all the social media sites.
And trying to apply pressure to censor conservative voices or whatever voices are dissenting.
And that's how they even got on 2 of our videos already.
Which with some kind of a one for election, the 2024 election to Wikipedia. Which
so
is
on our we were talking, I think it was 3 videos ago, and the title didn't even have 2020 in it. It was the election of 2024. It was, is Trump blowing his chances or something? But apparently we discussed for a couple of seconds, because I yelled into the screen to Trump to shut the fuck up about 2020.
Right.
It was that episode that, I don't know, some geek somewhere programmed something into the algorithm that picked up something and decided to put a link to Wikipedia about the 2020 election. everything is controlled. You know, listen, we're not here to educate anybody. We're no smarter than anybody else out there. You know, we're having a conversation, taping it. And anybody
talking
who wants
about
to listen to it, listen to it.
Hopefully learning a little bit as we go because we're exploring these
concepts. That's all. We have we're not authoritative voices on anything. So that to me, this is more of an insult to the viewers out there than to us, because YouTube is telling them, hey, make sure you know what we want you to know. So link on to Wikipedia this.
That's another
great site,
it's
right?
A perfect example of pushing the narrative. Right?
Yes, exactly. And again, we didn't even really say anything bad. I'm not convinced 2020 was stolen. You are. Who cares?
I do.
I don't know why anybody out there would worry that you think that or I don't think that. Doesn't matter.
But we've had some great conversations about that.
Of course
and there's been great points.
And you're
going to
always win those conversations because I can't. I'm in the position where I would have to prove a negative. I can't prove it wasn't stolen.
That's exactly.
You know, so I can't.
That's a hard hill to overcome.
It's not hard. It's impossible. I can't possibly. You know,
right? Without getting a negative. Yeah.
Right. I can't prove that there's not cheese on Pluto. Right. I just can't. And I can't prove that the election in 2020 wasn't stolen.
Yeah.
What I can say is that, to me, there's not enough evidence because that thing better damn well be... Because to me, if that's true, Mike, it's time to fold up the flag.
Because your vote was completely wiped out.
We're done.
Yeah.
You know, so do I want to believe it? No, of course I don't want to believe it. But I would believe it. Listen, you know the one thing that really got me thinking about it was on not election night, the night that they called the election for Biden.
Yeah.
Right, the night that the AP declared him the winner, and that's when the stolen election stuff really started coming up. I wasn't unwilling to believe it. I remember Sidney Powell going, she's going to release the Kraken, and I kept saying, all right, well, release it. Let me see it, you know. She never did. But the other side was just as disingenuous because within seconds of them declaring Biden the winner, the media was calling it, and I heard it many times, Mike, the cleanest election in our history.
You know, complete bullshit, yeah.
Now, that can't be. You can't know that 5 minutes after an election. You're telling me it's cleaner than 1848 or 1976 or pick a random year.
Yeah.
What do you mean it's the cleanest election, most honest election ever in our history? How is it possible that anybody could know that? You know, so then that made me wonder, all right, well, maybe it's not. Because if you're saying that, you're saying it for a reason, right?
Yeah.
To throw me. But whatever the thing is, that there is something in the algorithm that now puts a little link to Wikipedia, which is not exactly an authoritative site either.
Well, it's like
that doesn't bother you? You know?
Well, it's like the fact checks on Facebook or any other social media when you get the fact checks, right?
Who's fact checking?
Exactly. So during COVID, it was all these people fact checking all this medical information. Now, if you don't know my history, I was a medic in the military. I diagnosed, I treated, I did all these things. I have a very strong medical background, and I love medicine. I won't practice anymore, but I do love medicine, and I keep up with it, and I'm aware of it. I understand how science works, and I understand how medicine works. Now, during COVID, you know, if I said something about masks, because I thought masks were stupid, I thought it was a bad idea. From the start, it was a bad idea, because you're going to have people wearing the same mask all day long, touching things and touching the mask, touching things and touching the mask, and creating this reservoir of bacteria and virus. That's all you were doing. It wasn't going to help anybody really be, you know, better. I also didn't believe that the whole 2 weeks to slow the spread thing was a good idea either, but whenever I would put something like that on social media, my account would get locked out, I would get fact-checked, I would get all these nonsense. But I'm being fact-checked by people from like Snopes or other people.
Right.
What the hell background do they have? They have no knowledge.
But like we were talking about before with the canceling and everything, and the cancel culture and the editing and all of that sort of stuff, to me that's actually counterproductive for their goal, because it makes people then wonder, well, what are you suppressing? Why are you not letting me hear this? Look, there's a little bit of child in all of us, right?
Sure.
When your mother tells you don't touch that, first thing you did is you wanted to touch it, right? You want to find out. So as soon as they tell us you're not allowed to hear something, then you want to hear more. So, and when you know you're being bullshitted, it makes you want to investigate more also. So with the vaccine.
Yes.
Right? Now, I had no idea. Nobody had any idea. You can't claim to have. This might have been the miracle drug, the best thing since Jonas Salk cured polio. It might not have been. But when you tell me that it's 100, and they said this many times, Mike.
Yes, they
did. And this has nothing to do with Biden. This was under Trump, too.
We had Operation Warp Speed. He started it.
100% safe and effective. That's when my antenna goes up.
That's
because
what I got.
Tylenol is not 100% safe and effective.
Yep.
Anybody who's seen a commercial for any medication, Here's the warnings at the end. Could cause everything from drowsiness
to cannibalism,
to numbness,
to whatever,
to death by rectal explosion.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Every single medication has those warnings. But you're going to tell me that this one that you came up with 5 minutes ago is 100% safe and effective? That, don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining.
That started me on the path of like, wait a minute, like I'm skeptical with anything medical anyway, honestly. If you look at like Zantac, right? Zantac was on the market forever a day, pushed forever a day, and now all of a sudden, it causes stomach cancer and all these other cancers. Now, you knew that to begin with, but the FDA, somebody got enough money to shut up about that for a while until eventually it hit a crescendo point and they couldn't help it, and now they're all being sued. Yeah. But that's besides the point. The point with the vaccine for me, first of all, I thought Operation Warp Speed was the worst idea I ever heard. I was like, you can't develop a vaccine that quickly. Because there's not time to test it. You don't know what it's going to do to people.
Of course not.
And that's a dangerous game to play.
And there's no way you can possibly know it's 100% safe and effective before it's even been really rolled out.
And by the time that they even started rolling it out, we had enough data on the COVID and what it was actually doing to our populations to know that it wasn't this big giant threat they were making it out to be.
And we already had another variant.
Exactly.
But listen, I know that people want to get the vaccine. I had a problem with mandates. But the problem that I'm talking about here is the bullshit. Don't tell me 100% safe and effective. Nothing. Antibiotics are not 100% safe and effective. No. Aspirin's not 100% safe and effective. Don't tell me that you just found the first drug in the history of mankind
that's 100% safe.
100% safe and works 100% of the time.
Exactly.
That's when I have a problem. But then they ban anybody who questions it.
Well, yeah, they
then
did.
That makes me, and again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist by nature, but, if you're going to tell me I can't know something or I can't have access to this, then of course, listen, why do you think there's so many conspiracy theories about the JFK assassination? There weren't that many conspiracy theorists when the Warren Commission first came out with their report. Most people accepted that, but now you go years and years later, and we still are not allowed to see the documents. That's when people are going to start to think, well, wait a minute, what are you hiding from me?
Well, the CIA is hiding its own role in it.
Of course. So what I'm saying is if people are more transparent, there'd be less conspiracy theories, right? So if they were more transparent about the vaccine, don't say 100% safe and effective. Say, we think this will probably work. There may be side effects. It's probably good. We recommend that you try it. I don't think there would have been that much of a backlash as opposed to you must take this and it works 100% of the time and it's 100% effective.
But they don't want you to think for yourself. They want you to be a good sheep on a tax farm and just keep doing what they're telling you to do. They want you to be the modern serf.
Which goes back to what we opened with, right? That they don't want you to think. And again, I don't know who they are. I keep saying they.
I just call it an authoritarian cabal. That's all I say.
Somebody
it's a very small group of people, but it is a group.
They want to control what you think, and they want to control what you see, and they want to warn you, don't watch Gunsmoke, because, hey, there's cultural depictions in there that are outdated, because Matt Dillon's a tough guy.
So friggin' masculine. Stupid. Be feminine. Be you. Just be you. Just be yourself. Just
masculine,
be you.
feminine, whatever. Who cares?
Just be you. Don't listen to anybody else. Don't look for any example out there that's going to make you one or the other that's better or worse. It's not. Just be your damn self. Live your life.
But don't watch Gunsmoke.
Respect the rights of others.
But don't watch Gunsmoke.
It's simple. Just respect the rights of others. Respect yourself. Live your life the way you see fit. Be moral. Be honest. And just live your damn life.
And read what you want to read and ask questions.
Question everything. You should always question everything.
Always.
Because there's no learning without questioning. It's just that simple.
He's a learning.
Great teacher here, right? Great educator here. Over 30 years of doing it, That is the best person to ask about what it really means to learn. Because they've been doing it forever.
You learn by asking. That's how everybody learns, right? When you're building the room upstairs, what do you do when you run into something that you can't? You Google and you find out.
You ask yourself, okay, what do we need to do to fix this? Or how do I get around this?
You call your friend who's an electrician and say, hey, this is going on. That's how you learn. You learn by asking. You don't learn by being told. You learn by asking, right?
Empower yourselves. You want real empowerment, cultural, whatever. You want to empower your race, whatever it is. Empower yourselves. Ask questions. Talk together. Make sure you're consuming all kinds of different viewpoints to make sure you fully and completely understand the landscape of the problem before you decide what your particular course of action is. Taking what you're given and just running with it makes you an idiot. It doesn't make you anything other than a useful idiot, as Stalin said. That's all it does. So educate yourselves. Go out. Gather the information. Figure out things for yourself. Question authority always. Question everything else always, and learn and grow.
And
just be yourself.
And they're not learning from us, right? I mean, it's like we're not here to teach anybody anything. We're just having a conversation.
We're trying to spark a conversation.
This all started because his wife, my sister-in-law, said one day at a barbecue, "You guys should take these conversations here," because this is literally how we talk on
every time we
Thanksgiving
hang out,
or
yeah,
at barbecues
anytime we're together,
or anything
yeah,
like that.
that's how we talk.
Now, if these people stayed with us for an hour, Mike, they should really subscribe, don't you think?
I would absolutely agree. Listen, go down below. First of all, subscribe. Like the video if you like it. If you don't like it. It's okay.
Right down there.
But subscribe and then comment. Let us know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What is it that you found interesting or didn't find interesting? What do you think is better or worse? Whatever. Just get in the conversation. Let's have this conversation. Let's start this conversation nationwide. Let's get everybody talking to everybody else again.
That's it. Because so
bridge
far
this gap. Start talking again, so we can actually move things forward in the right way and make
let us know what you think. Because so far the only advice we got is from our father-in-law that I slouch and he mumbles. That's it.
I do mumble.
We need better advice than just that. So comment right down there.
We're refining our processes. Neither one of us is a professional broadcaster, right? So we're working on.
I'm not slouching anymore.
Our professional presence on here, but realistically, this should just be a conversation. That's all we're really looking for.
And go read Huck Finn. It's a good book.
Oh, it's a great book.
And The Scarlet Letter. And watch Gone with the Wind. It's a little
just read the classics. Go read the classics.
They're classics for a reason.
Yeah, go read the classics. They're important. They'll teach you a lot of lessons you never realized.
This video might be a classic. It's gone on about as long as Gone with the Wind.
Almost. All right, guys, like, subscribe, comment, share it out with your friends and family. Let's get this conversation going, and thank you.
See ya.
Good night, guys.